Click record. There we are. Right. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about leading worship online, and really maybe thinking about how we can do it better, how we can really kind of explore some more stuff, because the truth is it isn't going to go away necessarily, even if we manage to make it back into the buildings, which we will do, I guess, in the next couple of months. But we're still going to have people at home, probably for at least, until the summer. You would think people are going to be at home. And so I think it's just really good to spend a little bit of time thinking about how we can engage those kind of folks who are at home in worship. And I think when I was thinking about worship online, I looked at lots of different churches. I looked at, most of your churches that I could find, not watching it all. And I looked at some of the big sort of famous ones like HDB and Hillsong and people like that. And I think when I was reflecting on what it is that, what it is about our type of worship, our type of churches that I think is distinct, it is the fact that people come to our churches because of the fact that our churches are local. They come because there's a sense of real community and family, the fact that they are known and that they can be known, that they can be discipled, maybe a little bit more intimately than they might get in a larger church. And so when we think about worship, what I think we have strength in our worship is that kind of sense of unity and connection. And I think that is just so important. And I think that's one of the things that makes worship online so challenging, because you can't get anywhere near that sense of community. Like I know it sounds stupid, right? But just being able to stand, isn't it, in a room of people. I mean, how many of us just want to stand in a room with a group of people where you're not like 2 meters away from everyone, and just being able to hear people really sing and sense other people worshiping. It is something about that, isn't there? There's something distinct, and it's not just the fact that it's a group of people. It's the fact that you know some of these people, you know their stories, you know what they're struggling with, you know their ups and downs, and when you hear them, really pray, really praying, or if you see them really just going for it, and you think, man, I know what kind of week you've had. That must be really difficult. There's something in us, isn't it? And I think that is something that, to be honest, I suppose need to think about how can we create more of a sense, I suppose, of connection when we're worshiping together, because I suppose that dynamic is just so important. And I think I was thinking about this phrase. It's a very for those of us that know Chris Spicer, it's a very Chris Spicer type phrase, right? What we're seeking to get, isn't it, is we're seeking to help people worship, not watch. We want worshippers, not watchers. And I think that's what we're all battling with. It doesn't matter whether you're on Zoom or whether you're on YouTube. Really, the truth is, it's so easy, isn't it, at the moment, for people just to watch. And I suppose really our challenge is, how do we help people really worship at home? How do we do that? How do we get them worshiping? And one of the things that I thought about, and I just want to throw this in as a thought, really, when I reviewed some of the key passages about worship in the New Testament, this phrase came out to me. It's the same sort of phrase every time. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 26, it says, "What then, brothers? When you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. All of these things be done for building up." So I just want you to focus on that idea of each one. And Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18 says that we're to be filled with the Spirit, and it says addressing one another. And so I just want you to pick up on that phrase, one another, in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart. And then Colossians chapter 3, 16, 17 says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another." And so it's the same phrase, one another, in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And I suppose what I want us just to think about is there's a difference, isn't there, between personal worship and corporate worship. We all can worship at home the Lord, but what is it about corporate worship, the idea of being together, that makes worship different? And I think it's this idea of being of one another, of almost seeing one another, sparking off one another. And I, you're not necessarily going to be able to get everybody. I mean, different churches have different views on how you would outwork the practicalities of some of those verses. But in a sense, for me, I suppose what I want us to think about, if we're to get worshippers, not just watchers, I think we have to think about how in our leading we can encourage that sense of we're doing this not just on our own, but we're doing it together. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear, and I'm really keen to hear from you guys, how you're doing it, how you're encouraging that sense of one another. Because I suppose and this is the point, I suppose, why doesn't someone just watch HTB or watch Hillsong or just listen to music? Why do they come to our YouTube channel or to our Zoom meetings? I think it's because it's one another. And so I suppose for me, part of what we need to explore together is how can we just very practically encourage this togetherness, the fact that we're just like, we spark off one another. Because I think, we're in a pandemic and and they talk a lot about how contagious the virus is, but worship is contagious. I don't know if you figured this out, right? But when you hear somebody in your church really begin to worship and open up their heart, how many of us have had that experience of like, man, I was flat this morning and the music team did 0 for me, but when I saw that person just going for it, and maybe they're crying or they're opening their hearts, something in you, is it just me? I'm looking at all of you on the screen, but something in you just goes, yes. And something in you rise up. Like Drew loves to talk about people singing, and one of Drew's bugbears, right, is that people don't sing loud enough, right? That's one of Drew's things. But what Drew's saying is when I hear people singing really loud, there's something in me that says we're worshipping together. And that's the bit that we can't replicate very easily or very naturally online. And so the tendency is, I think, and this is totally what I've done, is just to kind of go, right, I'm going to just nail my set of songs and hope that people kind of enjoyed it. And I think what I've been thinking of is, how can we do this better? How can we create, in some weird way, it's never going to be the same, it's never going to be as good, how can we create a sense of that one another, that each one, that the fact we're in this together, that I'm not just worshipping on my own in my room, actually I'm doing this and somehow I feel very connected to someone that might be, a whole town away. Are you all with me? Give me a thumbs up if you're all with me. Bianca's asleep. Amen, Bianca, well done. That's good. But yeah, and that's my heart. And so I want us just to think practically how we can do that. So I've just come up with some practical ideas about how we might do this, because I don't know about how many of you, I suppose we've all had to we've not led every single Sunday, but I know that when I'm leading, I'm on it, I'm focused. But when I turn up and I'm just attending, the truth is, I don't know about you, but I sit down on my sofa, right? And the temptation is just to kind of have my cup of tea and just to kind of be like, okay, I'm kind of, and normally on a Sunday people lack energy. I know that there's some keen bunnies, like Jana is a keen bunny. It doesn't matter what, she's always there, right, all the time, right? But I'm less spiritual than Jana, so sometimes I sit there and I find it hard to engage. And I think that's who we've got to think about. That there's some people that are always going to be up for it, but how do we help those people who have sat down with their cup of tea on a Sunday, the kids have been messing them around and they've managed to sit down for church, maybe they only got up half an hour ago? How do we engage them really in becoming a worshipper, not just a watcher? And so these are some practical considerations. I'm just going to run through them quickly and then we'll talk about it. So the first thing is, I've actually, they're all notes. I'm going to send you the notes as soon as I've done this talk so you can read them. But I didn't want to send them in advance because otherwise you'd all just read the sheet and not listen to me. But the first thing is, please, and this is my encouragement to you, sing songs that people know and that they love to sing along to. Sing stuff that people love to sing, right? This is not your I'm sure that none of us have done this, but it's not your moment to shine and I think, where we think, okay, I can read this one, really shows my voice off. I'm going to nail this one because no one can argue with me. And I can't know if people aren't singing along. I can sing in keys too. Don't sing in keys that are too high. If people want to sing, not just watch, they need to still sing in keys that are easy to sing in. This is not your moment to roll out the back catalogue from Bethel or from Hillsong or a cracker that one knows, because the moment I don't know it, right, there's a good chance I'm just going to sort of go, okay, I'm just going to live listen, which might be okay if you're trying to teach it. I mean, these are my thoughts. You can disagree with me, but this is my thoughts. If I'm trying to teach you, that's great. But if I'm just watching and I don't know it and you're not going to do it again for 6 months, then I've immediately become passive rather than a worshipper. I'm a watcher. I'm now watching you sing. So, do you know, I've missed out a massive chunk. I'll come back to in a second. But yeah, so yeah, this is not your opportunity to roll out your back catalogue, right? And listen, if I can sing along, right, if I can sing to it, I'm immediately far more likely to engage with worship than if I'm just listening to you. My kids will come sometimes sit in a meeting with us, and the moment they hear songs they know, they start singing, and so we're all singing together. And so if you want people to worship, not just watch, please sing stuff they can sing to. Also, and this is a bit, Pete and I have talked about this when we've chatted on the phone. The truth is, we know that when we play online, we don't sound that good. I don't know, would you agree, Pete? Right? Oh, sorry, Pete. Maybe that's just. Don't, you know, you said it, Pete, not just me. We agreed it together. We are not the best musicians, right, with Jana quality voices, right? When we sing, to be honest, if you were listening to it, you might be like, is there a cat that's being strangled somewhere? But if people are singing, they can't hear you. They hear themselves singing. So they're not worried about how good your music is or how bad your music is because they're singing. So sing stuff, this is sounds simple, it's sing stuff that people know. Because also if you're feeling fed up, you're feeling low, there's nothing more encouraging than singing something that is as Pete would say, is a banger, because it gets people going. So that's my first point. The second point is this: start with high energy. Right? Start with high energy. I've realized that when I sit down on my sofa with my cup of tea, if you kick off with a long and boring song or something that's really like a bit drab, I'm already struggling, brother. Whereas I've kind of come up with this phrase, right? It's called think WPGTT. Right? What would Pete Greener do? Right? Or would Pete Greener do this? Sorry, would Pete Greener do this? Right? Because one thing I've listened to Pete lead worship at least once, maybe twice in this. And one thing when I listened to Pete, I was in COVID, I was feeling pretty ill, and Pete came in with high energy, and I was like, something in here is lifting me up, right? And there's been other times when we've started with stuff and it's been a bit flat, and I've been like, oh. We need to be high energy. And I think almost, you know, for some of us, that's harder than others, but start high energy. So that's my second point. Third point, be a bit spontaneous. If it's live, people love the spontaneity. Otherwise, why am I not just watch pre-record, right? Like Alice on Sunday, didn't you? Alice did what she called off the script song. And everybody, like all these people started texting, love the off the script song, and you know, it was, I think it was the fact that it was like, yeah, this song's really working, and it's the fact it's live and we're in this together, it's happening now and I'm part of it. So be a bit spontaneous in doing that. And I suppose lastly, well, not last, I've got loads more stuff to say, sorry, not getting off that easy, right? But point upwards to Jesus. It is a tough time. There's no doubt about it. This is really tough, right? People are struggling. They're struggling in lockdown. People are homeschooling. There's tears on a daily basis. You know, Jojo never has any of these problems, Joe, with your homeschooling kids. I'm sure your kids are lovely and amazing.
Are you kidding me? Are you actually joking?
Yeah, well, I had to literally physically wrestle with one of my children this morning, like physically wrestle him for 20 minutes in a fun way in order to get him to focus on doing work. So it's just, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us are really struggling. The danger is we can go there when we're leading worship. That is not where people need to go. They need to go upwards. And I think it's so important that we are continually orientating people upwards. If you do a set of songs, I really urge you, more so than ever, do we need to be pushing people upwards to the Lord. If we get sucked into songs that are about how I'm feeling all the time, in a sense, it might work for a moment, but it's probably not going to change them. And we need the Lord to change them, don't we? So those are just sort of some really practical thoughts around doing it. And so I don't know what you think about that, but I thought of here are some I'm going to add some sort of more really super practical suggestions now for you to dig into in terms of how you actually, so how do you actually do that? How do you get people engaging in worship in a way? And so I've just written a list and I'm going to read them out, almost just quickly read them out, and then we can talk about some of this stuff in a moment. So I would say, firstly, that we need to have more courage to be a little bit more directive. You know, like sometimes when we're leading worship in a church, you don't want to be telling people what to do all the time because you kind of sense the mood in the room, don't you? But online, I do think we need to be a little bit more, you know, let's all do this now kind of thing. And the truth is even if they're not, you don't know if they're listening to you. In church, when you do it publicly, you say, let's everyone lift their hands, and only like 3 people do it. You're like, no, come on, everyone. But you can get away with it online. But so I'd encourage you to be more directive. That's really important. But how about this, right? Ask people to stand up and sing. Whether you're on YouTube or on Zoom, I tell you, I've learned that basically, if I'm going to worship well at home, the best thing I can do is stand up. Because if I'm sat down immediately on my sofa, I'm so close to just sipping my tea, right?
Has everyone lost Tim? Was it just me? Everyone, yeah? Cool.
Saying,
Okay.
I mean, did you say something?
We all lost you, Tim, for a moment.
Sorry.
All night, mate.
Did you just say that was the best thing that happened all night when you lost me? Seriously. There's no love in this room.
You froze with your tea. It was quite a good freeze frame. You were like...
Yeah. My internet's been really bad all day. I don't know why. Yeah, so really get them trying. So what I was saying was it's so easy when you sit down with your cup of tea to just kind of sit back. But when you're stood up, you're so much more likely to engage in worship in that environment. So really encourage people to stand up. How about asking people to lift their hands in the air? Say, you know, if you're leading, I'm just thinking practically, you might say something like, you know, like, I can't see everyone lifting your hands, but, you know, let's all do it together right now. If you're sat on your sofa, if you're stood up, if you're in a kitchen, lift up your hands and know that everyone else, you know, whether they're at the other side of this town or not, is doing it together. It's that whole idea of one another. We're doing something together all at the same time. We've done this, like, and I'm sure lots of you have done this, like just pray on your own. We're going to play some music. You just pray out to the Lord and give a bit of space. You know, sort of, you know, give a little bit of space for people to pray, you know, just, you know, 30 seconds, 45 seconds just for people to pray. And then everyone's doing it at the same time. Now, you know, you haven't got to hear those other people pray, but at least everyone is kind of in some way connected and engaged. Again, I suppose you could say like times of reflection, you know, just sort of, we're going to just meditate on the words of this song for 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Again, it's not just moving from song to song. You're asking them to engage. You're asking them to actually be involved, to worship, not just watch us sing. I think this is great. How about using the chat function? Right, I know that we talk about this, but and I was thinking about YouTubers. How did the YouTube gang manage it? But if you sort of said, I mean, this might not work, but if you sort of said, right, during this song, you know, I want you to write something in that God has just blessed you with this week, you know, or something, or just share a short encouragement. And then as you're playing the song, it can come in. And then, you know, as the song finishes, someone could bring up, you know, the comments, and you can say, oh, it's great to hear, you know, what God's doing in your life, Betty, you know, amen for that prayer and that comment. Just love what's happening there, you know, Laura, you know, and I just, again, it's that sense of, oh, there's other people in this room. There's other people connecting with this. And the great thing is you're still in control. So if someone says something really random, you haven't got to read it out. You haven't got to read them all out. But at least, again, it's that sense of, you know, it's like, isn't it? You know, when you watch a live thing on just Pastor Stephen, Pastor Steve, put it in the chat. But yeah, but I think actually it's a great way of particularly if you've got, you know, those lurkers, those that are kind of behind the black screen. If you're on Zoom, you know, it's a good way to engage them, I think. What about this? Pre-plan some involvement with other men from your congregation. So ask someone you know who's got a prophetic gift to prepare a word and get them at the, you know, plan for it, but get someone else from your church, whether it's on Zoom or pre-recorded or however you're going to do it. Obviously, we're on Zoom, so we could ask someone specifically, ask someone to read a relevant scripture, because we might do, you know, stuff like that. And here's an off the wall suggestion that's totally off the wall. Have more musicians, right? But the amazing thing is, you can ask people, send the chords in advance, and say, if you've got a guitar at home and you want to join in this week with what we're doing, right? You can play at home. No one can hear you. So if you're rubbish, it doesn't matter. Play the piano, play the violin, play whatever you like, but join in. And it doesn't matter. You can be playing along with Pete. If you can keep up with him, you know, then you know, join in, kind of thing. But it's like, why not have people worshipping through the use of their instruments? And just real quick then, some Zoom specific ones. So if you're on Zoom, these might be relevant. They're not going to be relevant if you're on YouTube. What about the unmuting chaos? What I call the unmuting chaos. We've done this a few times. Everyone pray all at once and everyone turn their microphones on, right? It's brilliant. Honestly, it's really good. Everyone prays. It's a cacophony of noise. You can't hear anyone. Occasionally you hear a voice here and a voice there and a voice there. But it's like there's that sense of we're all in this together. Everyone's praying. You can do it for 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And it's been actually some of the more powerful things we've done actually at River Church. Sometimes it falls flat on its face and you just end up hearing one person pray. So you've always got that to worry about. But that works on Zoom. One thing we've done really well on Zoom is a time of thanksgiving. So just ask people, say, pray for one, you know, give thanks to God, but just keep it real short, you know, please, just one sentence. It's amazing how many people will contribute when all they've got to give is one sentence, you know, like, and then it keeps it moving. You haven't got long prayers, no one's getting weird, but, you know, or kind of it's dominating and you're still being able to box it into a box, as it were. And this is something that River do that I think probably other people might find a bit odd, but we spotlight people on Zoom. So if you're worshipping, yeah, we will do what we did to Timo, which is we chuck him up and everyone can see it, right? Now, when we did it, first of all, I thought this is going to be really weird, right? People love it, right? Well, you know, people do love it because they love to, again, if you see someone really worshipping, right, something in you kind of worships. The only thing is sometimes you know the camera's on you, so you're like, yeah, I've just got to keep holding it, and you have to sort of open one eye to see whether you can put your hands down because the camera's moved on. But I mean, these are Zoom specifics, right? But it's that sense, you know, I know that really it's about this. For me, I think worship has this one another dimension, and I think I'd love to see us finding more ways to kind of just get people worshipping, not just watching. And I think we're all doing our best, and this is just an opportunity just to explore this a bit further. But I suppose I'll finish with this point. The thing that will help people worship more than anything else is when we worship, when we really, really worship, when we let go and we just give it all to the Lord, people will be drawn into that. Yeah, worship is contagious. So if we are really worshiping, if we're really going for it, if we're really full of the love of the Lord, it's contagious, and it will capture people, and it will draw people off their sofas. It will draw people away from their cup of tea. It will draw them into the presence of God. And that's what we need. We need the presence of God in people's homes.